To understand the nature of man's work, we go back to the beginning, even before Genesis. God created this world whereto to fulfill his deepest desire. More than anything else, God wanted that there exist beings who would, of their own choice, recognize him and adhere to his commandments. To do this, God had to create a being who could in every way feel independent and unconstrained. The description of man's formation appears rather simple. God fashioned the form from the earth and then breathed life into it. The result, however, was complex. The name Adam in Hebrew, or Adam, is reflective on an unlikely synergy. Adam is on the one hand linked to the biblical word Adama, earth, and on the other hand to the concept of Adama Li'elyon, in God's likeness. The mundane and sublime, the earthy and spiritual, the temporal and the celestial, it is this dialectic that we begin to understand the species known as man. God spent 6 days creating a stage on which we are all the actors. He did this by concealing himself. In Kabbalistic terms, contracting his energy and pulling back, thus creating an empty place. A place in which he was not overly manifest, a place we call the world. The Hebrew word for world, olam, is etymologically rooted in helam, shrouded and obscured. God remained hidden to allow us our freedom, our ability to choose. Our mandate, latakin olam, to perfect the world, uplift it, infest it with goodness and spirituality. In essence, it is an exercise in the process of revelation, to unmask the godliness inherent in this world. Shabbos, a time to return. It is obvious that we cannot accomplish our mission by removing ourselves from the world. It is only by working within this physical material realm that we can uncover the godly sparks contained therein. The very nature of this exercise, however, is fraught with danger. As we become submerged in this world, we must struggle to remain above it. And the endless tension between earth and spirit, sheer weight often wins out. It is easy to forget our source, our reason for being, our point of departure and return for this journey we call life. Shabbos is a potent reminder. It takes us back to the beginning. The first 2 letters of the Hebrew word Shabbos from the word shav, return. Shabbos is a time of reunion, a return to the unity our soul enjoyed with God before being sent into its present existence. It is a return also to the perfection that existed after the 6 days of creation, before sin and the ensuing disruption. Because of the earthiness of our existence, we need to be nudged into this return. It is for this reason that God commands us to remember the 7th day and make it holy. This, God tells us, can be accomplished only through rest. Shabbos, a day of rest. What is considered rest? It is a facile and confusing to state that on Shabbos we stop working. Most of us know very observant Jews who work hard on Saturdays. They might be rabbis or cantors or neighbors down the block who open their homes to streams of guests with whom they share Shabbos meals. They don't seem to be resting. Just as perplexing are the maniacs prohibited under the rubric term of work that are not tiring or laborious at all. It is necessary to understand the notion of work as it applies uniquely to Shabbos. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch defined it. An activity is deemed work and thus a forbidden action on Shabbos based on its creative dimension. Simply put, on Shabbos we are commanded to cease from all behavior which leads to the creation of something new in this physical world. Spiritual and intellectual growth and innovation is not curtailed. One may compose a melody or write a new poem in one's mind. On Shabbos we desist from harnessing this world's energies and forces. We suspend our ongoing efforts to master and transform our environment. For this reason, the simple action of flipping a switch, which creates an electric current, is prohibited on Shabbos, while dragging a heavy sofa across the house for the purpose of seating extra people is not. In one, we are engaging a force outside ourselves to create a new situation. In the other, we are merely expanding our energy on moving something, but its essential nature nature remains the same. Similarly, we may not cook raw food, changing its state through the application of heat, but we can serve as many guests as we like. In like manner, we may not open an umbrella, creating a form of shelter, but we may tidy all the beds in our home. In mirroring God's original pattern, we seize after 6 days of invention and innovation from all forms of creation in the material realm. And that suspension of our power and prowess, we lift the veil and come face to face with our God, with ourselves, with our reason for being. Shabbos, a time of sensory delight. Shabbos is marked by a deep, sweet, peaceful tempo, a cadence all its own, and it is filled with unique purpose and activity. We spend time with family and friends. Our prayers are unhurried. Our minds are calmer and more open to study or quiet contemplation. Simply put, Shabbos affords us the opportunity to take a deep breath and reflect on our week, much like an artist who might take a step back to look at an unfinished painting and ponder its strengths and deficiencies. And Shabbos is a time of material corporal pleasure. In observant homes, even the 2-year-olds know that on Shabbos they get to wear their special Shabbos clothes and shoes, their fanciest hair bow or tie. The 10-year-olds know there will be extra treats, not to mention more time with mom and dad. The adults know there will be wonderful meals, and the house will be freshly cleaned, with everyone carefully groomed and dressed in their finest. The table will be beautifully set, maybe even accented by fresh flowers. The Shabbos candles will cast their magic glow. Upon reflection, this all sounds rather strange. If Shabbos is about remembering God's omnipotence, why squander the celestial on temporal pleasures? The simple answer is that on Shabbos is a mitzvah to experience delight and pleasure. For in doing so, we mirror the joy and contentment experienced by God after the 6 days of creation. On the deepest level, however, we understand this by going back to the rest and work relationship we spoke of earlier. During the week, our charge is to act in partnership with God by perfecting this world. We are engaged in looking beyond the plurality that confronts us to localize the unifying factor, the essence, the godly spark. This is difficult, laborious work. The material world and mindset is generally resistant to our overtures. On Shabbos, however, we rest. That is, there is no longer the tension between the physical and spiritual, for everything is more manifestly an expression of God. Even in the most physical actions, in our eating and drinking, we perceive that we are involved in holy pursuit. Tradition has it that on Friday night, angels visit each Jewish home. They are welcomed with the singing of a hymn called Shalom Aleichem. Oddly enough, the first stanzas of welcome and our request for their blessing is followed quickly by a bidding them goodbye. Welcome, O angels, O of peace. Come in peace. Bless us in peace. Take leave in peace. Why, instead of asking the angels to grace our home with their presence, do we seem to hurry them out? Why don't we ask them to stay with us during the duration of our meal and celebration? Jewish mysticism teaches that the angels, much as they may want to stay, simply cannot tolerate the experience. Upon their entrance into a Jewish home that has accepted the Shabbos, they are blinded and overwhelmed by a godly light so luminous that they must flee. The light of Shabbos far surpasses anything angels experience in heaven, for it is their fire created by our adherence to God's command, the glow generated by our choice, the torch of combined sparks we have freed, the light for which the entire world was created, and it is ours to bask in it, Shabbos. This gives us a little bit an idea of what Shabbos is all about and how really, in a certain sense, it's exciting. Well, spiritually exciting, it truly is. Hopefully you experience it, and it's then, as we said before, something else, quote unquote, that's boring for most people, but we're going to try to put a little pizzazz into it, and that's Jewish prayer, but an adult view. As a child, you probably received a sweater or some article of clothing you liked a lot. However, to your dismay, within a year you outgrew it. There was no alternative other than to replace the sweater with a new, larger one. Our first prayers and notions about God were learned when we were still children. But unlike our old sweaters, how many of us have thrown out our childish notions of God and prayer and replaced them with more mature ideas? For example, imagine that you are a 3-year-old child and you want a piece of cake. Your considerations as a 3-year-old are, I want cake. I'm entitled to it and I must have it. From this viewpoint of a young child, the major function of parents is to gratify the child's wishes. When they don't, the child feels angry and deprived. Now imagine yourself in the place of the parent. You happen to know that if the child were to eat the cake, he would get sick or lose his appetite for nutritious food for the rest of the day. From the parent's perspective, how would you feel declining the child's request? How great is the difference between the child's feeling and that of the parent? One of the fundamental differences between how children and adults view the world is that children filter the world primarily through their emotions, whereas adults can rely more on their intellect to make sense of their experiences. Our emotional view of God is often that of the child who wants. We often feel angry at God for hurting, frustrating, or ignoring us. We have to realize that these feelings are a reaction to our perception of God, not to the reality of how God acts towards us. We can never get total knowledge of God's motivations. Therefore, when we react to God's denying us what we want, we must rely, at least in part, on our intellectual understanding of his behavior, and also in part on trust in him. Adam and Eve, the first prayers. God created us with the need to pray so we would have a vehicle through which we could forge an ongoing relationship with him. We see this from the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The Bible tells us how the serpent enticed Eve to eat of the prohibited fruit of the tree of knowledge. She then gave Adam the forbidden fruit to eat. God responded by punishing Adam, Eve, and the serpent. Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, and Adam had to work the soil. The serpent was cursed by having to eat the dust of the earth. But what kind of curse was that? Dust is everywhere. No matter where the serpent might find himself, he would always have plenty of food. The curse was that the serpent was now self-sufficient. One who is self-sufficient will never approach his Creator to ask for his necessities. In other words, God was so disgusted with the serpent he wanted as little as possible to do with him. In contrast, God desired humans to always turn to him and to ask for what they need. Self-improvement through prayer. Prayer is not only a request for physical and material needs, but also a vehicle to transform ourselves into more developed persons. When we lack something, we should do some heavy thinking. What is it that we're missing? Do we really need and want it? If we get what we desire, will we use the gift in a way that God intended to elevate us spiritually? Without this process, we might simply use our blessings to satisfy our physical or material desires. Additionally, a prayer allows us to forge a relationship with God and make him a reality in our lives rather than an abstract concept. These are the benefits that the serpent, as well people who see themselves as self-sufficient, will miss out on since they will not feel compelled to connect with God. The need to verbalize prayer. One of the tenets of Jewish prayer is that it is not enough simply to think a prayer or to have certain feelings in one heart towards God. Jewish prayer requires people to actually say the words. Why? Why can't we just feel something in our hearts and communicate it to God by thinking? One of the greatest challenges of any relationship is in communicating effectively. Many married couples love each other, but cannot communicate that love. Love and communication are not synonymous. If a husband can't express his love to his wife or vice versa, the love may ultimately erode, eventually be replaced by aloofness or even resentment. In the same vein, it's not enough to worship God in our hearts. We must also communicate our thoughts and feelings verbally, or they cannot enable us to deepen our relationship with God. When we say what we feel, God becomes more of a reality for us. and we show a deeper level of sincerity about the relationship. No normal person speaks out loud unless someone is listening. Our verbalization concretizes for us that God really hears what we say. In addition, once we verbalize our feelings, they attain a reality that is much stronger for us than had we could not committed these feelings to words. God meets you halfway. As much as we yearn to reach a God who at times seems inaccessible, God yearns, as it were, to respond to our strivings. For our entire task in prayer to try to engage our hearts to talk to God, we may not succeed. However, the process of prayer is not a one-way street. Once we start talking to God, we demonstrate that we are trying to access Him. Quickly, God responds by allowing us to feel His nearness and His reality. The more we allow ourselves to let go of our privacy and share our innermost selves with God, the more we overcome the distance we feel between ourselves and Him. Well, these are two boring things. Well, I shouldn't say boring because I don't think they're boring, but I'm telling you that's what people tell me that are boring, Sabbath and prayer, and this in turn gives us a very deep feeling. Hopefully that would make it a little bit more ideas of what really prayer and the Sabbath is. And I can conclude with this, and this is a very special thing of what the Jewish people are, and we have a very big quote from Mark Twain about the Jewish people. And most people don't think Mark Twain had anything to do with Jewish people. So stay tuned. This is very interesting in our last few minutes on the show. As I look out from the balcony in our home in Jerusalem, I see an amazing sight. Mountains that pictures and descriptions from only 100 years ago show to have been desolate and abandoned are now flourishing with greenery and Jewish life. The Jewish people's return to Israel after 2,000 years of longing is nothing less than a modern miracle. Yet even before this physical return to the Jewish homeland fully materialized, we were already known to be a people of miracles, as none other than Mark Twain commented, quote, "If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race." Jew says, let me put a footnote in. That was 100 years ago. There are a lot less there now. More people and Jewish people have not grown, of course, since the Holocaust and a lot of assimilation. But let's not digress. It suggests a nebulous, dim puff of stardust, lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of. But he is heard of, has always been heard of, is as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his commercial importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. His contribution to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and abstruse learning are also way out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers. He has made a marvelous fight in this world in all the ages, and has done it with his hands tied behind his back. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise. They are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but have burned out, and they sit in twilight now, or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmity of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal, but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? His immortality. And that's from Mark Twain, the complete essays of Mark Twain. So it's not just any person, it's one of the greatest authors in American history. Mark Twain's observations are even strong in our times. Half a century ago, the Jewish people and its traditions were pronounced dead. European Jewish life, so full of study, joy, and hope, was decimated by the horrors of the Holocaust. Modern thinking people had no interest in perceived ancient rituals. Free thinking people had no time for anything spiritual. Today, however, we are witness to an extraordinary phenomenon. On the one hand, statistics showing the intermarriage and assimilation rates are frightening. On the other hand, people from across the spectrum of Jewish practice, young and old, well-educated, and successful in their careers, are exploring their heritage and discovering how much it offers them in meaning, happiness, understanding, and hope. In order to survive as Jews, we need both knowledge and inspiration, and we are finding it. All around us, more and more people are discovering their being Jewish matters. This is very, very important for us all. These are a few nice essays. I hope you enjoyed it because I really did. So I wanted to share them with you all. And because it's Sabbath and prayer are also things that people are bored of. And the Jewish people, unfortunately, I'm talking to Jewish people specifically, that they find themselves just like it's out of fashion and better to assimilate. There's more exciting things for them, and that's why I concluded also, which I think are the three major problems, if you want to call them, when the attitudes of Jewish people. Truth is that it's very, very, like he said, we're concluding paradoxical, because I think many, many more Christian people, more than any time in the history, people have a great regard for the Jewish people. Many Christian groups, of course, that they fully support, the strongest support of the state of Israel, more than any other group. Unfortunately, even more than most of the Jewish people, I would say. But on the other hand, you have the Jewish people that don't understand how special they really are, what the commandments are. Maybe they were raised in a different sense. Maybe they were educated in a different ideas. But this is what we're here for, is to tell people, and a lot of people that are Gentiles also, what is the Jewish people, what is the education, what are prayers all about. And of course, many of these ideas do pertain to the Christian people and Gentiles people, because we can all pray. And Judaism is very liberal and humane about this thing. And don't make a mistake about that. That all human beings are important, no matter who they are. And the Almighty God cares about every person. And that's Jewish people as well as Gentiles. So let's not forget the idea what Judaism says about this. There's no reason to be, left out in any sense. That God wants to hear from all of us and do our best to make the world better. And that is through prayer, and that is through helping one's fellow man with more ideas of goodness and kindness. And together, hopefully, we'll bring the Messiah, which everybody's working for the utopian society. Some people have different ideas how to bring it about, but the point is everybody wants to see a perfect world where there's peace, there's abundance for every human being, and there's no harm pertained to any human being in the world. And we're all looking for that, and hopefully we can see it very imminently in our days. We're all hoping for that, praying for it. It should be the prayer of everybody. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the show. I says, he said that to me. And he says, because he watches.
Dear friend of mine and my family that suffers so much from alcohol abuse. Alcohol,
really?
Yeah, it's
The rest of the
awful.
family, you mean?
Yeah, his father, him.
Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Delmar, and we have a very special guest with us. This is Aviva Rossman. Aviva, I've known you for 9 years, and she's been learning, and she's been coming around and growing, and then she decided to go off to Israel, and she spent the last 4.5 months in Israel. She came back, and she was telling wonderful stories and telling how beautiful Israel is. I said, you have to be on the Jewish View and not only tell us and the people that come to us. Let's make it public. Let's give our viewers and listeners a little bit of a taste of Israel. So that's why we're here today. Give us a little bit of a taste of Israel. Aviva. Actually, Aviva's been, even though she traveled around, her mainstay was in the city of Tzfat. And Maybe people know about it, they heard about it. I mean, people hear about Tel Aviv, they hear about Jerusalem. Obviously, there's many cities in Israel, like there's many cities everywhere. But Tzfas is very, very special in Israel history and even today. So fill us in over here, Aviv, your trip to and your stay in Tzfas.
In Tzfat. I actually, Rabbi, if it's okay, if I would start in Yerushalayim,
All right,
just
good.
because I wanted to share just a whole chain of events that has happened to me and has led me to Israel. I went to a women's seminary in Har Nov when I was staying in Yerushalayim. I have cousins that live in Yerushalayim. And when I called them and said, I think I might be coming to Israel, and I said, would you mind if I stayed with you for a while? They said, come tomorrow. So I knew it was the right thing to do and at the right time. So I stayed with them for my first month, and I went to this women's seminary called Sha'arim in Har Nov. And it's Orthodox, it's Haredi. It doesn't have a specific group that it follows, but it's very Orthodox, and it follows very, order of halacha. Its order of halacha is very...
Yeah, halacha, just Jewish law, just to translate
Okay.
for everybody.
So the interesting thing is when I was choosing different seminaries to go to, I had gone to many different ones, researching, wanting to choose the best place to spend my time. And I was sitting down one day and really thinking Sha'arim's the place for me. And my cousin Henry looked over at the table in the kitchen and at me and said, do you know what Sha'arim means? And I said, no. And he said, it means gates. And then I knew it was the right place for me to go. The reason is because years ago I was doing some work with an energy healer, a Reiki healer. She was balancing my energy. And the interesting thing was this vision came to me of this man in a long white beard standing in front of two very, very large and high gates. And one of the gates was partly open, and there was a very bright light shining through. And he was pointing his finger and then beckoning me, saying very softly and whispering, come, come. And I knew it was that I needed to come somewhere to learn. And at first, it really affected me because it wasn't something that was an image that was internal. It was something that came from outside. And it was very powerful. And I kind of put it off for a few years. And then it started coming back to me. So when my cousin said, do you know what Sha'arim means? I got goosebumps. And I had already decided that it might be the right place for me, so I went. So I went to the seminary, very intense, very interesting. It has, it keeps borders. They actually have a dormitory where women can come and stay and study, and it has a variety of different coursework, anything from, halacha to Parsha to...
Just translate for people, Jewish law, and Parsha means, because the Chumash, the Bible's divided into 53 different sections, so every week in synagogue, everybody reads a little different section in the Torah, so just not to read it and just hear some Hebrew words, but obviously in the Torah there's what to learn, so people tune up and they read about it every week, and so therefore you go through the whole Bible with many more commentaries and more depth every year. All right, so go ahead. That's what they do that for every week.
Right. And they also have on Alpan, they have a variety of different courses also.
Yes, Alpan, just translate
Sorry?
for people. Sorry, I mean people may not be familiar with, just interject, that the Alpan is Hebrew language, of course, that Israel native tongue is Hebrew. So they're very good about that, of just, there's so many immigrants coming from all over France and Germany and South America and of course America with English, and they just want to integrate everybody into the Hebrew language. So they have some very good advanced Hebrew language courses just to get by with Hebrew there.
They also had some other interesting courses that were very interesting, interpersonal communication classes. They had one particular course on love and relationships, which was fantastic because within the middle of the course I realized that the instructor was the author of a book that I had read just before I came to,
Oh, really?
yeah, just
That's
before
really
I
good.
had come to Israel, and her name is Gila, I think it's Mendelssohn, or
Right, yeah. Oh, that's very interesting.
and she wrote, she actually wrote The Magic Touch. I believe the book is called The Magic Touch, and it's about Shamnar Nagia. Then I had decided that on my itinerary, my list, I had different places that I wanted to see. And the next place, I had about 3 weeks left to my vacation. I had intended to be there for 2 months. I went to Sfat for the weekend. And I stayed at a place called Descent, which is a youth hostel for just about anybody. And it's interesting because it attracts a population that is anywhere from very Orthodox to very, very secular. So it is a Chabad organization, and the founder is Rabbi Leiter, who I'm sure you know very well, and him and his wife were amazing. Actually staying there, it was extremely affordable, and you had a whole Shabbos where you first would be taken to a family Friday evening that you had a host family to go to for Shabbos. Then they would have activities and classes throughout the day on Saturday, and they would have a big community or communal get-together for Shabbos on Saturday. And the programs were outstanding. And during that time, I had this experience